find yourself a nice tub. I mean, this is a very basic wormery, and you can pick these up anywhere, supermarkets, little department stores, but you need to put some holes in. I would advise you to ask your parents or some adult to help with this. Older children would probably be alright as long as they're supervised. There we are. See, they don't have to be very big, it's just as long as there is air getting in. Oh, that's gone through really well. So that's just to give you the idea. Obviously you want a few more, and preferably not that whole, but so don't worry. As many as you feel. My drill bit's quite small, you could maybe get away with a slightly larger one, but as I say, you've got to be careful with plastic because it does tend to crack, and it's helpful to have something to drill into. Then what you need to do next is put some cardboard, because when you've got lots of holes, the cardboard will just, well, keep it safe, but you'll still get air through because you're going to dampen this. Then your next job is to get newspaper and just tear it into strips. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. You just sort of spread them round a bit so that you've got a complete covering of strips of newspaper. Then we need to dampen this down a little bit. Not too much, because we don't want them too much liquid, and we've got holes which it will eventually drain out of anyway at the bottom. So your next thing is some compost for the worms to actually live in. So, and what I'm using bought compost, because a lot of you may not have your own compost bin. If you've got your own composting heap or whatever, then, and you've got some ready-made compost, it's probably a good idea to use that. That will do for now. So again, just give this a little drink. A teeny one, that will probably do the trick. And then we come to our worms. Now then, can you see all these little beauties, which are quite happily munching away at what I fed them last night? I got these out of my Dalek compost bin at home. You will always find these worms. These are not earthworms, they're special composting worms. As you can see, they're thin, they're redder, and they're completely different from an earthworm. You don't really want earthworms in your wormery. If you haven't got access to any worms, and you know somebody who has got a compost bin in their garden or a compost heap, just ask them if you can go and have a little dig around and you will find some. You can look online and you can actually buy them on the internet and have them post it to you, which always makes me think, does the postman know what he's carrying? So I'm going to just try and gently tip these out kind of evenly. Not that it matters, because they're quite able to move about quite freely. And then it's dinner time. So this is when you actually feed your worms. Now this is what we're going to feed our worms. These are just household scraps. As you can see, a bit of cauliflower, a bit of cabbage, a bit of chard, potatoes, an apple. But you don't want to be putting onion in with into a wormery. The worms don't like it, it's too acidic for them, and also it does make it smelly. And also you don't want citrus fruit. The apple is okay, but you certainly don't want oranges or lemons or anything. Now another thing that's quite important when you're feeding your worms is to not give them great big bits. So I'm going to cheat a bit for speed, but if you chop, I mean you can just tear these, it doesn't really matter, but I'm just chopping into tiny little bits so that you've just got a small amount there. but you're making them into little tiny pieces because worms do not have teeth. So if you're wondering how they eat all this lovely food, I suppose they suck it, and they just sort of suck it into their bodies. And then what you wait for is for it to go through, and the worm casts are made, which is basically just worm poo. So that's what you're doing. You feed them at one end and the goodness is coming out of the other end, and going to work with what else is in your compost bin to make all your lovely compost. As you get more worms and as your wormery builds and it becomes deeper and higher and what have you, you can afford to put more food on the top and also larger bits, because you've got a lot more worms, because worms multiply like crazy. So it might look as though you're starting off with very few worms, but it won't be long before you've got hundreds of them. But you can't see them when you lift the lid, which is a bit annoying really, because you expect them to all pop up and wave at you and say, here I am. They don't, they burrow really far down, so it always looks like you haven't got any, but trust me, you have. You haven't got a huge amount of worms in here yet, so you don't need loads and loads of food. See, I'm still thinking I've cut it small, but just pop that. Now that will keep them going for a few days, I would think, a good few days. So now we are going to cover that over again. And what will happen, the worms will pull that down into the soil that's already in there, the compost that's already in there, and enrich it with, when they're fed, they'll pull it out, and that is where you get the compost. Worms like darkness, and they like a constant temperature. You don't want to let them get too hot. You want it in a sheltered space somewhere. I mean, you can even, if you live in a flat or something, you can even keep it under your stairs or in your kitchen or something. It doesn't matter where, because the worms are secure, and also it's quite handy for feeding them if you do that, I suppose. Or somewhere outside in the shade. Just put that there. And that way it's loose, so they're not, you're not sort of restricting the air, but you're just keeping them in the dark, which is what they like. And it's dead easy to pull it and have a look at. Now you'll need to give them the odd drink, because they do like moisture, so just check it, have a feel. If it feels dry, just give it a tiny little sprinkle like that. That's probably enough. You don't need any more. And then pop that. And then, as I said, this is one that I found and I couldn't find the lid. But there are ways and means of making lids. You could make it fit perfectly so that you had to prise it out, or what I'm going to do, because it's the simplest way really, it's very clean, is just lay it on the top and find a couple of little stones or something to weigh it down. So there you have your very basic wormery. It's not taken long, it's been fun, and it's dead simple. If you look online, you will find lots of different types of wormeries. This was just a simple one to just get you thinking about how easy it is to do and have a bit of fun one afternoon.